So, time for some of our story. So we've been reading the Jam Doughnut that ruined my life. And if you remember rightly, the last part of our chapter, they were visiting the aquarium. Now this part of the chapter is called Everything Starts to Go Wrong. Darren Gamble was inside one of the fish tanks. He was holding his breath. That's not a good idea, is it? And he was doing breaststroke from one side of the tank to the other. People were slapping the green, scummy glass and laughing and cheering at him. It took me a moment to realise there wasn't actually any water in the tank. There was a big sign outside that read, "Jellyfish moved, cleaning in progress." But even by his standards, this was pretty nuts, and I didn't like it at all. When they managed to get him out, there was a door behind the tank that some idiot had left unlocked. Mrs. McDonald asked Miss Clegg to hold Gamble's hand. Miss Clegg put on a glove, as though Gamble's hand was covered in toxic waste. Knowing Gamble, this wasn't completely impossible. "Right, next room," said Mrs. McDonald, herding us all out like cattle. Her cheeks were now the same colour as a fire engine's, a bright red. Halfway along a bright corridor, everyone suddenly stopped. A little girl about 3 years old was sitting on her potty right in front of us and wailing. "Wee-wee! I need a wee-wee and it won't come!" "Oh, great," said Gamble. "Oh, it's okay, darling," said Mum, trying to sound calm, but not really doing a very good job. "I told you this wasn't a very good place for a potty stop. Let's try somewhere else." "No!" screamed the little girl, clamping her hands around her potty. "Wee-wee, here!" The mum bit her lip and looked at Mrs. McDonald. "Oh, don't worry, dear, we've all been there," joked Mrs. McDonald. By this, I hope she meant that she'd been the parent of a small child. The idea of Mrs. McDonald using a potty was something I didn't want to think about. Stay left, children, stay left, everyone." We walked in a line, past the potty and into the next room, which was called Shallow Hall. It was much lighter than the dark zone, and it was way harder to eat my donut in here. Inside the hall were 2 large shallow pools that you could lean over the side of. In one there was a selection of rays and crabs. The other had a big sign on it, and it read, "Danger! Poisonous jellyfish! Keep your hands out." I guess this was where they'd moved to from the empty tank in the other room. While the class began drawing the rays, Gamble leant right over, shoved his head under the water, and then shook it all off like a wet dog. "Oh, shall we have a donut now?" said Jane, smiling sweetly at me. "Our donut? Good grief. Since when had it become our donut? I didn't like the sound of this at all." "Well, I'm not sure," I said uneasily. Jane's bottom lip started to quiver. "Oh, all right, I said. The last thing I want to do is upset her. We didn't even have a 10-minute anniversary yet." I looked over to Mrs. McDonald, and she turned away from everyone and was talking on her mobile phone. By the sound of things, she wasn't happy. I caught the odd phrase like, "Yes, you buffoon. I know he's put on weight. What do I pay you for?" I don't think teachers are allowed to chat on their mobile phones when they're meant to be looking after us. Brilliant. She was totally distracted. I had to grab my chance. I reached into my pocket and carefully pulled out the Jam Doughnut. Peeling off the cling film and covering it with my clipboard, I broke off a tiny bit and placed it into Jane's hand. This made me feel like a total hero. Like I'd just given her one of my kidneys or something. Yep, I was a terrific boyfriend. Jane looked at it for a moment. Nice one, Roman, I thought. She's so delighted she's speechless. Pretty awesome, eh? I said cheerfully. Don't eat it all at once. She slowly raised her eyes to mine. A sweaty little crumb, she hissed. Is that all I'm worth to you? But, I said, totally surprised. What's wrong with it? She held it up to my face. Firstly, you need a microscope to see it, she said, and secondly, it's warm. Hunched my shoulders. Sorry, it's been in my pocket for an hour. Are you trying to make me sad? She said, her voice cracking and her face crumpling up. Thought you were kind. This was terrible. I thought she'd be delighted, but she was weeping, crying like a baby. People were staring at us. I needed... Oh, my pages are stuck together. I needed to do something fast. Desperately, I split the whole thing in two, and as jam oozed out into my fingers, I handed her half. Well, okay, it was quite a bit less than half. Jane brightened up immediately. Oh, thanks, Roman, she chirped. Hang on, I said. Were you pretending to cry? Before I could finish my whole sentence, Jane dived in suddenly and kissed me on the cheek. This wasn't exactly as bad as I'd feared. In fact, it was pretty cool. I let out a noise that sounded a little bit like meep. Oh, this is so romantic, she said. The romantic mood was rather spoilt, though, by a little girl crying from down the corridor. Wee-wee! I need a wee-wee! Oh, cover me, said Jane, bending her head down to eat the doughnut. I stood in front of her and tried to look on the bright side. I'd almost lost half a doughnut to Jane Dixon, but she was my girlfriend, and she was nice. Maybe it wasn't so bad after all. Maybe after this she could get hold of some money and start buying them for me. Maybe she'd bring me a whole box of doughnuts every single day. Yes, that would be brilliant. But that is when everything started to go wrong. Giz a bit, said Gamble, suddenly appearing from behind me. I quickly turned around, holding half my doughnut behind my back. No, said Jane, doing the same. She hadn't quite managed to get it all in her mouth. He's my boyfriend, and he only shares with me. Oh, shut it, Melonhead, said Gamble. Oh, that's a bit rude. His face and his hair were still soaked from where he'd had it in the fish tank. Jane turned to me. She was fuming. Are you going to let him speak to me like that? Nobody had told me that being a boyfriend meant I had to stand up to nutters. I don't want to sound like a wimp, but come on. We are talking about a kid who once bit a duck in the playground. Well, that's not a good idea, is it? A bit feathery. He'd be spitting feathers. Come on. Why are you being so horrible? I just want a bit of your doughnut. Innit? Said Gamble, shaking me off by the shoulders. Thankfully, Miss Clegg stepped in for a change. Darren, she called in her bored voice, come and draw this flat thing over here, whatever it is. It's all right, you can save it for me for later, said Gamble, and he began bouncing off. Oh, wonderful. Don't be scared of him, said Jane. If you're not having it, I will. Well, that sealed it. She might have been my girlfriend, but there was no way that Jane was getting the whole thing. In any case, maybe he'd forget to put on his trousers after PE. And accidentally went, I've missed Elizabeth, I am sorry. Well, that sealed it. She might have been my girlfriend, but there was no way Jane was getting the whole thing. In any case, maybe Gamble would forget. Gamble has a terrible memory. On Friday, he forgot to put on his trousers after PE and accidentally went to play outside in his underpants. Actually, knowing Gamble, this might not have been an accident. I peered over the barrier into the Stingray tank. Then I took the rest of the doughnut in my cupped hand and pretended to cough, and I lifted up to my mouth. Something cold and wet smashed me in the face. A massive blob. For a moment, I just stood there, stunned. Then my cheek began to sting. I looked down at the floor, laying by my feet, what looked like a massive blob of blackcurrant jelly. Jelly! As in jellyfish? And that is the end of the chapter today. Let's see what happens tomorrow when he sees it's a jellyfish for real. See you then.